Welcome to Bold Talk series, where creativity, leadership, ideas, innovation come together. My name is Ludvik, and today I have a privilege to have a short one-on-one conversation with Robert L. Broadbent, partner at Womble Dickinson. Robert, great seeing you. Welcome to our Bold series. How are you?
I'm great, Epi. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me to participate in this series.
Well, looking forward to it. And obviously, we got connected. You've been writing some of the articles in crowdsourcing that got my attention, got attention to my team, and they forwarded that to me. And then this is how we got connected. You join us having some of a conversation with us and a blogs series that we've done. But let's go first with an overview about Womble Bond Dickinson and what got you join them, the journey about what inspired you to join the firm.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a non-standard journey. I think probably most attorneys that you're accustomed to dealing with have been civilian attorneys their entire career. For me, I started in the military. I started in the U.S. Army as an Army judge advocate, and spent 23 years serving as an Army judge advocate, supporting primarily the Special Operations Forces in our Army, and really served at every level from what we call the battalion level all the way up to a four-star command, a command called U.S. Special Operations Command that is comprised of about 90,000 special operators that operate globally and use data and applications in order to do their business on a day-to-day job. And then from there, I went to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency after I retired. NGA is responsible for collecting space-based imagery and providing maps and mapping data to the U.S. government and our partners and allies throughout the world. I led a team of 12 attorneys there, the Mission and International Law team, because we relied heavily on our partners to build resiliency in our data sources, both on the imagery side and on the geospatial information and data side of the house. And then about a year ago to the day, I left NGA.
You could say retired, right?
Yeah, well, I left. I retired from the Army about 7 years ago. Was at NGA for 7 years. Left there a year ago and joined Womble Bond Dickinson. Really, to be candid, to be closer to home. I was commuting between where I live now in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., living up there during the week, coming home on the weekends. Presented a little bit of a challenge given the fact I have 3 teenagers, so wanted to spend a little bit more time at home. So Womble Bond Dickinson offered the same collaborative environment, the same problem-solving collaborative environment that I experienced at NGA and in my time in the service. So that's what drew me into Womble Bond Dickinson. And then I've been building my book of business and working with clients on the corporate and securities and international trade side for the past year.
Nice. Now, just for viewers out there, what does a Womble Bond Dickinson, what specialty area?
Yeah. So Womble Bond Dickinson is a fairly large law firm. We have about 1,200 attorneys spread out through 30 offices between primarily the United States and the United Kingdom. And we provide legal services across the gambit of practice areas and legal issues, from corporate formation to exports to intellectual property to litigation, you name it. We can provide those services to our clients. We also have a non-legal services advisory services firm that is a wholly owned subsidiary, and I'll get into this. This is how we met. We met through Presentis. So Womble Bond Dickinson owns Presentis. Presentis provides advisory services and outsource compliance for businesses relating to fintech, relating to crowdsourced data, relating to other compliance matters. And we've got a bunch of subject matter experts that help us do
Nice.
that.
Now, yeah, so now it's clear to me, but it's also great that the audience can know the difference here. Now, I remember you wrote an article, you co-wrote this with with Howard, I believe, your associate.
Right. Howard Herndon.
Yes, and it was about the challenges of privacy protection in crowdsourcing data annotation.
Right.
Can you give us some insights on this, and where do you see we're heading um, with this in the age of AI?
Yeah, I think, crowdsourced data annotation, or using the crowd to help with data annotation and validation, it's really a tool to help with machine learning. We're moving beyond just machine learning and natural language models into generative AI, where AI is replicating and accelerating the pace at which it learns. And in fact, I think it may start generating AI to complete task, right? So you have AI creating AI to accomplish a particular task. I think that generative AI is probably going to have a significant impact on the way that we do uh, on the way we do business on the crowdsourced side of the house. So typically, I had experienced, using crowdsourced data as the crowd being just humans. I think now we're moving into a realm where we're going to have a hybrid crowd, where it's a crowd that consists of both humans and machines. And the mix is going to vary depending on what the questions are, what the queries are, and what's needed, what the end state's going to be. And keeping pace with that is probably going to be fairly difficult. It's going to keep you and me in business for a long time.
Mm. Yeah, that's it's really interesting because obviously I was hearing at the Abundance 360 Peter Diamante's summit that does once a year, and I was joining that online, and the Ray Carswell, which is the uh, the head of engineering for Google, he was talking about the large language models. We use this the language models instead. It should be a large object model, so we're not just reading the language but also the objects. But it all this depends on the models that we are that they're taken to process
Mhm.
it. And so I'm afraid that that's going to be a bit of challenge, and the accuracy level and between the machine and a human. But I think this is just the beginning, the way how I see it. So I was in the beginning, we get to experience a lot of interesting things, but still human factor plays a major role, I believe, getting this and accurate data.
Yeah,
And
I agree. And, you know, we talked about what can leaders, what can organizations, what can lawyers do to keep pace, or what should they do? And really, leaders and lawyers have to understand the process. They have to be involved in the process on the back end at the start, as well as you got to review it at the end. So what you talked about, humans have to be in the process. I think humans have to be in the process at the beginning and at the end, and there have to be automated off ramps that bring humans back in as the machine does its work in these hybrid crowds, if you will.
mm, yeah, yeah. Now, leaders, how can the leaders balance the need for innovation, um, while maintaining privacy and data security standards, especially in industries that are strict with regulatory requirements?
Yeah, well, I think the regulations, the global regulations that we see developing you can look at AI, for example. The EU has a risk-based model. It's a really good model. The United States has essentially mirrored that with the most recent executive order on AI, and then the the NIST, I forgot what the term stands for offhand, but they developed like 300 different ways that companies can assess risk as it relates to AI. I think that if crowdsourced mechanisms, tools, and data are going to integrate AI, they've got to integrate the standards, the risk assessments into the process, and those have to be automated to a degree because of the pace. So leaders, right now, leaders are playing catch up, and really, I think that there needs to be an education process and then automation built in that automates the compliance throughout the process. That's really, in my view, the only way that we leaders and lawyers keep pace with the technology as it evolves.
Mm. Yeah. Now, what are some common challenges or misconceptions you encountered regarding privacy, innovation, and how do you address them?
Yeah, I I think I'll give you an example from the Department of Defense. The U.S. Department of Defense is a behemoth, um, and it drives a lot of the policy as it relates to commercial capabilities. Um, the Department of Defense is concerned about crowdsourced data because it it deals, in their view, primarily with humans. Humans collect the data, they perform the ask, the tasks, and they're like, well, if humans are performing the ask, it's got to be human. Well, it's not. And what the policy is doing is it's basically putting a square peg in a round hole, saying we're just going to categorize all crowdsourced data and tools as human. Now do the coordination for human. The problem is that a lot of these crowdsourced data platforms and providers, their crowd consists of 6 million, 10 million humans. How do you coordinate? How do you review and understand what's going on with a crowd that big? It's just technically impossible, and it will become even more challenging as um, as machines are added into this crowd hybrid crowdsource mix. So I think what the department needs to do is not shoehorn, and really governments need to be take the same approach. And I lean more towards the risk-based approach that the EU has taken on
Mm.
with AI, is to apply a bit of a risk-based approach and apply some automation to those processes. So for instance, with the Department of Defense, they may have certain areas that are high risk. If it contains personally identifiable information, it's high risk. It should, have a human take a look at it. If it's associated with a certain topic, it gets extra scrutiny. I don't think applying categorizing it as a certain thing and applying those standards to it is a workable solution for the future. So on the compliance side, I would say it's the same way. If a government is just shoehorning crowdsourced data into a regulatory framework without understanding and allowing for the innovation, it's going to unnecessarily constrain innovation in this realm.
Mm. Now, looking ahead, uh, what trends or developments do you anticipate shaping the future in leadership on innovation and privacy?
Yeah, I think that with the velocity you'll probably, or we will see potentially a change in the definition of what's considered personally identifiable information, or what should be encompassed within privacy regulations. Because we walk around, I'm holding up my phone, but you know, children are now receive a phone, it's part and parcel to their identity, right? And so what actually is part of an identity now? So I think there's some thought that needs to be given to that a little bit more holistically. Maybe a risk analysis needs to be applied to that, because this is a cell phone's a machine. It's a source of information. It can be part of the crowd. So how do we want to regulate and monitor that as it relates to privacy information at scale? And again, the way that we do that has got to be in a way that machines can understand it and apply it in an automated way. That's the only way we'll be able to keep up, because you can't off ramp every 2 seconds as you encounter a device. You're going to have to have rules that enable the technology to work at speed, enable it to modify queries at speed, and then apply risk reduction measures and off ramp to humans as results are produced.
Yeah. Very interesting times, Robert.
They are.
Interesting times. You know, can you imagine in your field, we're talking about a complete change, how things are handled from a private and public sector. Now, Robert, what does the word bold mean to you?
It means having vision and taking action. That's how I see bold.
I love
Taking action when there's little guidance.
I love that. Well, I say take massive actions. um, Robert, thank you. It was great to connect, and hopefully we do a whole 1 hour together sometime soon in this subject. It's a very interesting subject. Always be bold. Congrats on all the successes, and never going with the status quo of being retired, and just keep pushing further. Thank you for
Exactly.
joining me in this Bold Talk series, and look forward to seeing you again. Take care, be great, and be bold always.
Thank you so much, Effie.
Cheers.